The words that we focus on tonight are found in Mark chapter 14. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said to them. "Stay here and keep watch." Going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Simon," he said to Peter, "are you asleep? Could you not keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the body is weak." Temptation is nothing new. It's been here since the Garden of Eden. Satan has been perfecting his craft since then. But how often do you actually think about temptation? Do you think about it every day? Do you think about the different temptations that you might face that day? Do you take temptation seriously? Because the devil tempts us, and he does it because he wants to drag us to hell with him. And we can look at the world today and compare it to the time of Jesus, maybe the time of the apostles, the first century. Maybe we can even go back to the Old Testament times and think, well, we have a lot more temptations today than they did. Well, Paul wrote to the Corinthians, he says, "No temptation has overtaken us except what is common to mankind." And so it's not that we have more temptations, but maybe we think that temptations are more readily available. Or maybe they're just different situations. Do kids have to still honor their father and mother? Maybe they're tempted not to because it's not just mom and dad, but stepdad and stepmom and stepdad and stepmom. Well, do I have to honor them like I honor my mom and dad? Maybe it's just the temptation of what goes into our minds through our eyes and our ears, because social media is right there at our fingertips 24/7. Temptation is all around us. We can't hide from it because it's out there in the world, and even if we try to hide ourselves away from the world, temptation is still going to be there because it's within us, in our sinful nature, that tempts us to live not according to God's will. And temptation is going to be here. And the devil is going to attack, and he's going to be relentless because he knows he only has a certain amount of time, right? Either the time that we die or Jesus comes back. And so he's going to keep tempting us. We're going to face temptations from our sinful nature. We're going to face temptations from the world. So what do? Well, we turn to Jesus. And we turn to him when those temptations come. And why turn to Jesus? I mean, he was the perfect Son of God. But he knows temptation. Right after his baptism, he's led out into the wilderness. Mark says that once the Spirit sent him there, he was in the wilderness 40 days being tempted by Jesus. He was tempted for 40 days, relentlessly. Now, the Bible records 3 of those temptations, but it shows us how really the devil works and how he tempted Jesus, right? First, he tempts him because his belly's hungry. Turn these stones into bread. He tempts him to put the Father to the test. God says that he will send his angels to guard you and protect you. So jump off the temple and prove it. He tempts Jesus to forsake his Father's saving plan. Look, I will give you all of these kingdoms. All you have to do is bow down and worship me. You don't have to go to the cross. Just a simple act of worship. But think about that. That is how bold Satan is in tempting the very Son of God, God himself, to sin. And he even uses the Word against the Word in the flesh to do it. And his whole plan is to stop God's plan of salvation. And it didn't stop after the wilderness temptations. If you remember, there were angels that came and strengthened him, and the Satan left for another opportune time. Well, tonight we see another opportune time, right? In the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus knows exactly what's going to happen the next day. And the devil wants to stop that plan. And so he draws from his arsenal and he uses fear, doesn't he? Remember, Jesus is true God and true man. And do you think as true man he's afraid of what's going to happen the next day? Do you think he's afraid of the pain he's going to endure physically? Wyatt, sit still. The pain that he's going to endure physically, the torment that he's going to have to feel his Father's wrath, the terror of just what he's going to go through as he suffers literally an eternity of hell for sinners. And he knows what's coming. Drinking down that cup. And he prays, Lord, all things are possible. Let this cup be taken. But why is that cup so horrible? What's in the cup? Well, there's Adam's rebellion, Jacob's deceit, Abraham's lies, David's adultery and murder, Matthew's greed, Peter's denial, Judas' betrayal, Paul or Saul's murders. That's all in the cup. All of those sins of all the people of all time, which include our sins, right? Maybe the sins that I've committed in the past that I've kept hidden. Maybe the thoughts that have gone through my mind that if they were laid bare, they would bury me in shame. Maybe it's the things that I've said that have hurt others. What thoughts or words or actions of yours have been poured into that cup? And what does God's Son do? Drinks the cup. The one who has no sin makes that sin his very own. And not just does he make our sins and become those sins, then it's also paying sin's wages, right? Judgment, wrath, punishment. So what does Jesus do? The Son of God, the one in whom there is pure holiness, becomes our sin. The one who is life and in whom there is life goes to die on a cross. The Son who is love, who loves his Father perfectly, who his Father loves perfectly, now has his Father's love turned away as he's forsaken. True man and true God. As true man, that brings a great deal of fear and terror to know what you're going to do, that you're going to become sin, that you're going to suffer sin's consequences and sin's punishment. And so yet, he remains perfectly pure, in tune with his Father's will and what he does. And so what does he pray? Abba, Father, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. He turns to his Father in prayer. temptation is conquered, he drinks the cup, right? And not just part of the cup, he drinks every last drop. He leaves the garden and carries his cross to the place of the skull, and there God condemns sin in flesh itself, in Christ. God's judgment is served in his Son. God serves us with mercy, forgiveness, and love. In the first garden, Adam sins, and then what does he do? He runs and hides, right? But here, Jesus prays. He remains holy and stands firm. Then about a stone's throw away are the three disciples. Jesus returned to his disciples, found them sleeping. Simon, he said to Peter, are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch for 1 hour? He says, watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And you remember Peter, James, and John, they were sort of the inner circle of the inner 12. So there was the 12 and the three close disciples. They had seen some amazing things. They saw Jesus raise Jairus' daughter from death to life. They were up on the Mountain of Transfiguration where Jesus shone in all of his glory. And they're the ones who say, even after all they've seen, all the miraculous things, all the things that they've heard Jesus say, still say some pretty crazy things. Peter, James and John are the ones who sent their mom to ask Jesus. So right after Jesus, this is the gospel for Sunday, right after Jesus tells them the Son of Man is going to go suffer and die and then rise, and they send their mom and to say, hey, can one of them sit on the right, one of your left, the powers of authority in your kingdom? And Jesus' answer is, well, can they drink the cup that I'm going to drink, the one that I just talked about? Well, sure we can. And then there's Peter, right? The one who, even if everyone else falls away, Jesus, I never will. As a matter of fact, I'll even die for you. So the one who's willing to die, and the ones who are willing to drink the cup that Jesus is going to drink, they can't keep their eyes open and watch for an hour. Jesus told them, right, stay here and keep watch. And so instead of being a source of comfort and to be there for Jesus as man, as true man, they sleep. Overcome with sorrow, they're tired, and so they sleep. Right? The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So what does Jesus tell us? Watch and pray. Right? We tell people when they go driving, right, watch. Driving back and forth to school, 12, 14 hours on the road, you had to be alert. There were a lot of times where this would start happening. And that's dangerous, because if you start dozing off for 1 second, it can mean life or death. Taking your eyes off the road for a second to check the phone that just beeped can mean life or death. So if it's that important to keep our eyes open and to keep watch while we're driving, how much more important is it in our spiritual lives? Yet what happens? We don't keep our eyes open to the temptations that might come, and our eyes blur. We fall asleep. Satan is ready to jump. Peter says he's still prowling around like a lion, looking for someone to devour. That's what Paul writes to the Ephesians. Wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead. Christ will shine on you. It says, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but unwise, making the most of every opportunity. Watching, right? And he says, pray. What a friend we have in Jesus. And what do we do do we run to him and pray? Do we turn to the Lord in prayer? Well, our flesh is weak and temptations are there. So yes, turn to the Lord. Trust the one who overcome and overcame all temptation. Trust the one who has the power to do that, who is stronger than Satan and tougher than temptation. And listen to the promise he gives you. So Paul records it in 1 Corinthians. He says, God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it or stand up under it. God is going to provide a way out. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. And so God says, watch and pray. And without his gift of prayer, without being able to turn to him, without his strengthening through his word, we would deny like Peter. We would betray like Judas. We would sleep like John. And we could go through the whole list. David. We could go all the way back to Cain. When the flesh trembles in weakness, when we have our eyes open to the temptations we might face, being watchful, turn to the Lord. Turn to the one who triumphs over temptation. He has the strength to do it, and he's the one who has the strength to help us overcome temptation and to stand up under it. Rest your soul in the wounds of the one who gives forgiveness and healing, and the one who gives strength. Now, will temptation go away? No. It's always going to be here. It's a part of life. And Luther said about temptation, he said, you can't keep the birds from flying over your head, but you can stop them from making a nest in your hair. Right? What's the point? When you see those temptations coming, don't just sit there and let them nest in your heart. Turn to the Lord. Shoo the birds away with Jesus. Be watchful and pray. And yes, is Satan cunning? Does he have a whole arsenal of temptations and different methods to tempt him? Yes. But you have Jesus. And Jesus is perfect at saving. So even though Satan is good, Jesus is perfect. Turn to him. Turn to him only and always. Amen. We'll continue.